Hello there, and welcome back to the Let's Learn to Fly podcast. My name is Heather Monthi, and I am your host for this podcast. In today's episode, we are going to talk about the difference between the Part 107 commercial drone license and the recreational drone pilot certificate. So this will give you a comprehensive overview of what it takes to become a licensed drone pilot. We're going to include all the eligibility requirements, a little bit about the written exam, and then the actual application process itself. So after listening to this episode, you might be eager to start flying drones as part of your business or career. The great news is it's not all that difficult to become a licensed drone pilot, and there are a lot of different opportunities available once you have that pilot certificate. So listen to this episode to learn everything you need to know about the Part 107 commercial drone pilot license so you can figure out, do you want to get the Part 107 commercial or do you need the recreational certificate? So let's talk a little bit about how to decide which drone pilot license is right for you. So we're calling it a drone pilot license here because that's what a lot of people like to call it, but the official term is that it is a certificate. The Part 107 certificate is actually the remote pilot with a small unmanned aerial systems rating. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about a drone pilot license, and I'm saying this in air quotes here. So when I say the term Part 107 certificate, drone pilot license, remote pilot certificate, that's all interchangeable. We kind of use those same terms, but the official term is it is a remote pilot certificate with a small unmanned aerial systems rating. So in order to fly your drone for commercial purposes, you need to have that Part 107 certificate. If you're flying just for fun, you don't need your certificate. So, when you want to think about if you need to get that particular certificate, let's think about some of the different things that you want to think about as you're making this decision. So the first is going to be the purpose for your flight. So if you are using your drone for commercial purposes, you might be trying to get into delivering packages or taking photos or videos for business, or you're doing some sort of research around, drone delivery services, this kind of stuff, then you need that Part 107 certificate, okay? So the rule of thumb here is sort of that if you're flying for fun, you don't need that certificate. That's recreational, okay? Anything else becomes commercial. So you don't need to necessarily have compensation exchange hands. Okay. So somebody doesn't necessarily need to pay you for it to be a commercial operation. So if somebody says, hey, can you come take videos of my wedding, or can you take videos of my kids' high school football game, something like this, that becomes a commercial operation. You're not up just flying your drone for fun. So also you want to take a look at the weight of the drone itself. So if your drone's less than 0.55 pounds or 250 grams, that does not necessarily need a Part 107 certificate. There's a couple nuances there, but for the most part, you don't need that Part 107 certificate. Most of the time, those drones are going to be very difficult to fly outdoors anyways. I have a couple drones they're toy drones. They're used for educational purposes, and if there's any sort of wind, you can't fly them outside. And also, if your drone is over 55 pounds, this is actually going to fall under traditional aircraft regulations. So those two numbers are really sort of the threshold there. Is it's less than 0.55 pounds, you don't necessarily need the Part 107 certificate. But if your drone is over 55 pounds, that's going to fall under traditional aircraft regulations. So that's a whole different code of federal regulations there. Then you also want to look at if the location of your drone and where you're actually going to conduct the flight, okay? So, for example, if you're going to fly your drone indoors, you don't need that Part 107 certificate. The FAA does not have jurisdiction over the airspace inside a building, so you do not need the Part 107 certificate if you're flying the drone inside. So again, the simple answer here is that, if you're trying to figure out if you actually need to get the Part 107 certificate, the simple answer is that if you're doing any flying that is not recreational, then you need the Part 107 certificates. This is going to be things like photography, videography, surveying, mapping, delivery, inspection. So back in the day, before drones were really sort of all over the place, they were affordable, you could go to Costco and buy them, you used to hire out a commercial manned aircraft pilot to take you up to do some of these different things, or to actually do some of this work for you. So for example, if you were a photographer and you wanted to get some aerial photography or videography, you needed to hire somebody with a commercial pilot's license so that they could take you up and fly you around to what it is that you wanted to take pictures of. And then they bring you back and you've got your pictures and you're good to go. Okay. Same goes with surveying, mapping, any sort of inspections, pipeline inspections, looking at crops on a farmer's farm. All that kind of stuff used to be done with manned aircraft, either a helicopter or an airplane. And now with drones being much more affordable, it's a lower barrier to entry. It's a lot easier for people to get their Part 107 certificate, and they can either offer this up as a service to photographers or, farmers or, oil pipeline companies, things like that. Or if you are one of those people, you are somebody who works in that particular industry, you can add on your Part 107 certificates so that you can add that on as part of something that you offer up either in your business or as something that you do in your career for your employer. So again, a reminder is basically if you're flying your drone for any sort of business purposes, compensation does not need to exchange hands. Then you need that Part 107 certificate. There are some exceptions. Again, flying your drone indoors, the FAA does not have jurisdiction over that airspace, and there is some limited educational purposes. I'll link to a previous episode that I did about that. I probably need to do a full episode let's dive into that into complete detail. So let's talk a little bit about how do you get your Part 107 license. So what is it that you have to do? So there's a few steps that you need to take. First, you need to figure out if you're eligible. So the first thing is you need to be 14 years old to take the initial exam. You have to be 16 to take the recurrent. Okay, so your certificate lasts 24 months, so that actually works out okay. You also need to be able to read, speak, and write English. So as long as you've got those requirements, then you can actually go and take the exam. And the exam is something that you'll go to a testing center. You'll actually take the exam. They'll give you a printout. You'll actually then apply for the exam or apply for the license after that point. So let's talk a little bit more about what does it actually cost to get the Part 107 certificate. So you might try to decide, is it really worth it in my career? Is it really worth it in my business to make this investment? Well, obviously, if this is something you're going to be offering up in your company, yes, you absolutely need to have it. And it should only cost you a couple of $100s at the most to get your drone pilot certificate. So first, the exam fee itself is $175. That is what the FAA charges for you to actually take that exam. If you're listening to this in the future, that cost may have changed, but as of the recording in September of 2022, the FAA exam fee is $175. There are some discounts available if you're active duty military and a couple other things, and you should absolutely look those up and do some research on that as well. Then the FAA does provide all of the study materials for free on the internet. The problem is it's kind of all over the place. It's you want to look at this particular document for this thing, this particular document for this thing. There's this document that's really huge document, but you only need to know a little part of it. So it's a little bit all over the place. So what I did is I put together a Part 107 study guide that shows you all of the different free resources that the FAA has published for you, and I show you exactly what pieces to that you need to study. So some of the documents, yes, you need to read through the whole thing. But when we're talking about the regulations, there's certain regulations you need to know. You don't need to know all the regulations. You need to know Part 107, but you don't need to know all the Code of Federal Regulations when it comes to aviation. There's also a document called the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. It's got some really great information in there for you as a drone pilot, but you don't necessarily need to read the whole entire book. So I show you exactly the different chapters, sections, etc., of all these different documents that you should use to study for the Part 107 exam. Okay. Now, if you're like me, I like to have printed materials. I've got books all over the place. I like to have things printed. I like to write in my books as I'm studying and take notes in my book. And so I always purchase the actual printed copies. So you can go on Amazon. I've got some links for you there as well. You can go on Amazon and actually purchase those documents. You always want to make sure that you're getting the most current documents, though, especially with the FAR-AIM, which is the Federal Aviation Regulations and the Aeronautical Information Manual. That is a document that is published annually. And if you go on Amazon, sometimes you find some old ones out there, or people trying to sell their old ones on like Facebook Marketplace, stuff like that. You want to make sure that you're getting the most current publication there. Actually, of any of all the publications, it's just the FAR AIM is one that I see frequently that, this is something that's published annually, and people will try to sell their old books to unsuspecting people. That actually happened to me when I was taking my flying lessons. I started flying lessons in 1995 in the school I was taking flying lessons through. They were not keeping up on their inventory, and they sold me a 1995 FAR AIM. So that was sort of my first bad purchase in aviation. So I want to make sure that you just learn from my mistake there. The other thing is to make sure that if you are ordering any of the printed documents that the FAA publishes, make sure you're getting a color copy of the book. What I did find, I purchased a book on Amazon and I did not realize it was a black and white copy. And when I got it, I'm like, oh, this is completely useless, because there are some things specifically with aeronautical charts that you need. It's color coded and you need to be able to see the different colors. So having something black and white is, going to be useless at that point. So you're talking here, you've got free documents from the FAA. You can make a purchase. You can purchase those books for, probably under $75, I would say, maybe right around there. And then if you wanted to, you can take an online or an in-person course. And this is where somebody will just guide you through all of that different material, walk you through it. And that person is then available for you to ask questions to. So I'm actually working on creating an online course. I do have an in-person course already available. I'm working on the online component to that right now, so that you can just go on letsflyaz.com and you can purchase that there if you were interested in that. But that is an opportunity for you. You've got all these study materials and you just really want somebody to sort of guide you through it, explain it in a little bit more detail. You don't always want to sit and read a book. You can do that as well. There's a lot of really good stuff on YouTube. One thing that I have noticed about YouTube, I've spent 20 years of my life in education. YouTube's been around for a while there. And one question that constantly comes up is, why should I, pay to go to college when I can learn how to do all this stuff on YouTube, right? Well, there's a lot of different reasons. That's a whole nother episode and probably not particular to this particular podcast. But what you don't know when you are coming into a field that's brand new to you and you don't know the right questions to ask yet, it's sometimes difficult to figure out what is good material and what is not good material on YouTube. I've worked with people trying to learn how to write code, how to learn programming languages, and there's some good YouTube channels out there and there's some not so good YouTube channels out there. So you can certainly use YouTube videos as well. You just want to make sure that you're using YouTube videos from a reputable either company or a person who is very well versed in aviation and really knows their stuff. Okay. So now when we're talking about the materials and the cost, let's get back to that here. So the cost would be, if we wanted to purchase the books, $75 or so maybe. And then a course is going to run, anywhere between $100 and $200. And then the exam itself is $175. So we're talking about just a couple $100 to become a licensed commercial drone pilot. And so how long does it take? How long does it take you to actually get that certificate? So it's really just going to depend on how quickly you can study and grasp that material. I would say it would, if you're brand new to this and you can dedicate a couple hours, each day and, sometime on the weekend, you could be ready in 2 weeks to pass this particular exam. If you go through a 2-day training course, you may be ready right at the end of that particular course. So it's about, I would say it's anywhere between like 12 and 20 hours of study time. Maybe less if you already know some of this stuff. You're already familiar with drones, how they work, how they operate. Maybe you've already had some experience with weather. It just really depends. If you're brand spanking new coming into this and you don't know anything about anything, I would say plan, 12 to 20 hours. 20 hours is probably a little on the high side, but you can certainly, take 2 solid full days and study this material, and you should be ready to pass the exam. Now, does that mean you know the stuff inside and out? Probably not. One thing I do know is that anybody coming new into aviation, some of the things that they struggle with are airspace and weather. All right. And so when we're you were getting into this world of aviation, airspace is a new concept to most people. You have when you're out driving around in your car, you've got the highway system. It's a two-dimensional system. We all know it. We all understand it as licensed drivers, right? But then as we get into airspace, now we're talking about a three-dimensional world. And there's a lot of different rules and regulations based on what altitude you're flying at and the proximity you are to a particular airport. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that, okay? So you'll have a few questions about that on the exam, but you want to make sure that as you progress in your career as a drone pilot, that you really, truly understand airspace, how to read aeronautical charts so that you know that you are operating your drone safely and in the right spot. The other is weather. So most people are obviously familiar with weather. We're familiar with different types of precipitation. We know rain, we know snow, we know sleet, hail, all that fun stuff, right? But when you watch the weather on the news, you're getting sort of this just general explanation of what the weather is on the ground. What is your commute going to be like to work? What is your weekend going to look like for, a holiday weekend, stuff like that, right? But when you're looking at aviation weather, again, we're in this three-dimensional world where we're looking at what is the weather at this altitude, what is the weather at this altitude. There's clouds in the sky, but where is the base of those clouds? There's precipitation, but what kind of precipitation is it? What is my visibility? How far can I see? Okay, so there's a lot of different reports that you can get and charts that you can get with regards to aviation weather, and some people, it's brand new to them, so they just got to take a little bit of time to actually learn how to read them. It's not difficult. It's just learning how to read them and decipher them. So, for talking about time, I would say anywhere 12, 20 hours. 20 hours is probably on the high side. And again, if you are somebody who you're kind of familiar with this world already, you could probably crank through it much quicker than that. So how do you actually get your Part 107 commercial drone pilot certificate? So first is you want to make sure that you meet the eligibility requirements. You need to be at least 14 years old to take the exam, 16 to take the recurrent exam. You also need to be able to read, speak, and write English. Then, as long as you meet those requirements, you can actually go and take the exam. So the exam is a 60-question multiple choice test where you need to answer 70% of the questions correctly in order to pass. You'll take that test at an authorized testing center. So you can get online right now and see where your closest authorized testing center is. You can look for a Pearson testing center or something like this, and you can get online on their website, and then you just choose the exam, and it'll say, what's the organization you're going to go through. It's the FAA, and what is the exam you want to take, and it'll give you all the different testing centers, so you can see what the testing centers are. If you've never taken a test at a testing center, it's one of those places you go. They don't let you take in your phone, your wallet. They don't let you take anything in with you. They will set you down at a computer, and you will be given a testing supplement, and which I do have a YouTube video on how to use that testing supplement. And you will be given a piece of scratch paper, a calculator, and then they'll show you exactly just how to actually use the software on the exam, and you'll take the exam. And then when you're done with the exam, as long as you pass, well, either way, pass or no pass, you're going to get a knowledge test report. And on that knowledge test report, it's going to indicate whether or not you passed the exam. And if you did not get 100%, it'll tell you all the different codes of the different areas and where you did not answer the questions correctly. So you could go back to the Airman Certification Standards and cross-reference that to see what areas you did not pass the exam in, so that you could brush up on that. So if you failed the exam, certainly go back through it and figure out where you struggled a little bit and need to study up some more. If you did pass the exam, but you didn't get 100%, I still suggest going back and looking. It's just part of the learning process, figuring out, what it is that you need to work on and study up some more. So then from there, you'll actually apply for your Part 107 certificate. It's very easy. It's a very easy process to do. So it's just really like, if you pass the exam, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the certificate. There's certain reasons why the FAA would deny your application to get the Part 107 certificate, but if you meet their requirements, then you will be issued a drone pilot certificate in the mail. It is about the size of a credit card. You can fit it right in your wallet, and you're good to go. So in between there, so when you take the knowledge test, you pass the knowledge test, and then you're waiting for the FAA to send you the actual card in the mail, you will be issued a temporary certificate that you can use as your drone pilot certificate. So you've got that knowledge test. You want to make sure you got that knowledge test report with you that shows that you actually passed the exam, and that you're just waiting on your permanent certificate to come from the FAA. So once you've done that, then you can start flying drones commercially. Once you've passed that exam, you're good to go. So this opens up a whole new world of opportunities for you, allows you to get paid doing something that you love. You just want to remember to always fly safely, follow the rules and regulations that are set forth by the FAA. You are operating in some airspace where manned aircraft are. Generally speaking, manned aircraft are going to be a little bit higher than you, but not all the time. And as you start learning more and more about airspace, you'll know exactly when they will be operating under 500 feet or under, in the airspace that a drone may be in, which is 0 to 400 feet AGL. So anyways, now that you know the basics of what it takes to become a commercial pilot certificate, get your commercial pilot certificate, you can decide if this is the right path for you. It's not a difficult path, but just take some time and effort to learn all the material. You can head over to my online store where I've got a Part 107 study guide. If you go to learn.letsflyaz.com, you can grab that study guide. And again, I'm also working on a full self-study course that will be released soon. So stay tuned for more information on that. Thank you for joining me in today's episode, and I will see you all in next week's episode.